Hi Twin Flames, it's Lisa here. So I want to talk a little bit more about ego death. I want to talk about some of the stages and some of the symptoms of ego death because it's a really big part of our journey. So it's a really key indication that you've met your twin flame because quite often, not long after getting activated by your twin, you're going to have some kind of ego death. And I know for me on my journey, not only had I never even heard about twin flames, but I certainly had never heard the term ego death before. So when I met my twin and he rejected me and I plummeted into an ego death, I had no idea what was happening to me. I had no idea what was going on. And I had to find out for myself that I was having a spiritual awakening. So if you are someone who is going through ego death or is someone who's not long had one, then I just want to guide you through that a little bit and help you to realize that you are not alone on this journey. Ego death can be incredibly lonely, incredibly scary, and you may not really know who you can talk to about this stuff. You may not feel like you can tell your friends or your family because of judgment or because they'll worry about you. And I know for me that I kind of tried to keep all of this to myself because I just simply didn't understand what was happening to me and I didn't know who to share it with. So an ego death doesn't really have set stages, but there's certain things like that the experience does often include. So you can call them stages if you want, but it's different for everybody. Ego death doesn't follow some structured format as such, but there are typical things that will happen during an ego death. So the first thing that happens during an ego death is you may kind of start to lose your sense of self. So the self starts to dissolve. You start to feel very detached from your identity, from who you are, and you start to kind of feel a little bit lost. So this detachment from the self, this almost becoming an observer of yourself, creates a lot of confusion and it can create a lot of fear. I know for me, I just felt incredibly terrified. I felt like I was losing myself. I felt like everything I knew was slipping away. I felt like I didn't really know who I was anymore. I didn't know what was true anymore. And I just felt like everything that was familiar and safe was all now in a state of confusion. So this can be called dark night of the soul, and it's more than one night. These can go on for anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of months. I do know some people who had ego deaths that went for years. So the variation and the length of an ego death can differ. I have had, I think I'm up to about 4 ego deaths now, each one varying in length and intensity. My first ego death was by far the worst because it came out of the blue and I had no prior knowledge of what an ego death was. So it completely caught me off guard and it completely scared the pants off of me because I simply was just so afraid of what was happening. It's almost like you're watching yourself slipping away and you can't really do anything about it except let it happen. And as the ego does dissolve, there is pain in that because the old self is dying. The parts of you that you thought were yourself are starting to die. So this is when we kind of have a huge identity crisis. You might start to question who you are, who is Lisa? You might start to question your role in society. What is my role here? What am I even doing here? What is the point of everything? So you might start to have some really deep and meaningful questions coming out of the blue that make you question everything that you know. Sorry, I'm just having a flashback. It can be a really unpleasant time. really scary. But I'll get to the good part in a minute about why ego death is something that you should welcome. Okay, so after the I starts to die, you go through dark night of the soul and all the feelings of confusion and fear. You will get to the good part, and that is the part where you start to feel more rebirthed. You start to feel like the new you is emerging, and you will have like a new expanded sense of self. So you'll be like more aware of universal truth. You'll have a more knowing about the laws of the universe, about a higher power. You will be able to see things in a much more deeper and meaningful way. So when you can see deeper layers of truth of not only who you are, but of the entire universe, this takes you to a really good place. So it's kind of like you fall off the cliff through dark night of the soul, but then you start to come out of it and start to feel a lot clearer, a lot more wiser, I guess, and you feel a lot more like you are more spiritually aware. So each ego death is helping you die to the self and come more into alignment with source and leading you more closer and closer to enlightenment. All right, so this is where the positive feelings of an ego death kick in, and often they're kind of like the last stage of an ego death. And the positive feelings are usually amazing. So you kind of go from the depths of despair to feeling a oneness with everything. You'll start to feel connected to source. You might even feel more one with other humans, with God. So you'll feel less fear, less separation, and you'll start to feel more unity and more of a unified love. Okay, so try not to be fearful of ego death. There are parts of it that are incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly scary. This is where people end up in mental asylums, people end up in jail, people end up in all sorts of problems because they simply panic. They simply don't know what's going on, so they instantly think that they are unwell, or they go and do something that's out of character to try to deal with the fear and confusion. All right, so if you are going through an ego death, I do recommend taking a lot of private time. I do recommend isolating for a while until the worst is over. And I do recommend only talking to people who understand. So don't go telling everybody about your ego death. Just try to find one or two people who you know are trustworthy or may have gone through some kind of spiritual event themselves. Other than that, you want to keep this to yourself. It's a very personal and very private experience, and a lot of people aren't going to understand because most of the world is still unawakened and still asleep. A lot of people aren't going to understand what you're saying, so they are going to be worried about you. They're going to think that you're unwell. Sometimes people might even think that you're going crazy. You might even think that you're going crazy. But the point here is that it can be a very personal and individual experience. So be very selective about who you share it with. Okay, and you will come to the point probably where rather than being afraid of an ego death, you start to feel like it's okay to have one. I know after each ego death that I had, I started to realize that after each one, I really liked who I was a lot better. I really got closer to source. I really got to see all the deeper layers of how the universe works. My third eye really opened. I became more psychic, more all-knowing. So without my ego in the way, without my mind in the way, I could truly start to tap in to my soul energy. So this is why you might hear some people saying, how do I have another ego death? Or how do I shrink my ego? And it's simply because they realize that life is a whole lot better when the ego is small. So life gets a whole lot better when your ego is more quiet and it's out of the way, and you haven't got like your mind and the stories going on all the time. without that ego, you can be operating more from the heart space and more in tune with your soul energy. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me. If this resonated, please like and subscribe. I also have a new membership section where I'm covering some deeper topics, some 18 plus topics. If you feel like joining, just go to my YouTube homepage and click on the join button. I hope to see all of you guys there. Have a beautiful day and God bless.